So let me tell you something about finding employment, like mainstream 9 to 5 employment when you're disabled. It's hard. It is so much harder than abled people going out and finding a job, which is hard. It's already hard enough for abled people to find a job, especially now in 2023. It's so hard. For how hard it is for you all to find a job, times that by, double it, triple it even. And yes, even though we do have the ADA, also known as the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's not really enforced. To be quite frank, it's really not as enforced as everybody seems to think that it is. Too many loopholes, easy workarounds. It needs to be updated. And as someone who spent so many years after high school applying to the most basic of basic jobs and getting denied for either one, a lack of experience, or two, very likely being deaf, and thus being forced, if you will, into self-employment, which is extremely hard. I don't make a lot of money. It's overall just a real big pain, right? And so here we are with a news article from February about a deaf woman being fired because she's deaf, which is very common. Actually, I would say it is more common to be rejected first for being deaf rather than being fired for being deaf, but woman gets hired for job, then position is pulled because she's deaf, lawsuit says. A woman hired to work at a warehouse learned the position was pulled days after she was supposed to start. A national staffing agency canceled the position for her because she's deaf, even though the e-commerce retailer, which runs the warehouse, had fully accepted her as an employee at their warehouse in Maryland. And this is all being told via a lawsuit that was filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Preventing a woman who primarily uses sign language to communicate from working at the warehouse violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. I feel like we're starting from the end of it all and then going backwards, because already we are learning that there was a settlement, and the settlement was of almost $120,000. We will take action when a hiring official chooses to believe that deafness alone negates all of an applicant's skills, abilities, and positive attributes. This is especially true when the discrimination comes from staffing agencies, as they play a significant role in referring persons for employment in the labor market. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of people out there that think that deaf people are not going to be able to do jobs, not even the simplest of jobs that don't even actually require communication with people, like sit down office jobs that literally all you're going to be doing is just looking at a computer screen, right? You know, it's not like air traffic control that we're talking about here. The case dates back to November 2021 when Liner Staffing forwarded the woman's application to Whitebox, the e-commerce company, according to a complaint filed in court. The company was told at that point that the woman is deaf. So some of us will already write on our applications that we're deaf to get it out of the way. And also because oftentimes there's going to be a job interview, the employer is required by law to book an ASL interpreter, which is also a reason why people tend to go around like this loophole and be like, yeah, we're not going to accept you for a job interview because we just don't feel like you're going to suit us very well, when really it's just because they don't want to pay for an ASL interpreter. So sometimes we just want to get that information right off the bat because nobody wants to deal with this beating around the bush thing. But then you will find some deaf people just don't want to say anything yet because they don't want to risk being discriminated against and not having a chance at the job interview. One option is not really better than the other or worse than the other, I guess, because you never know what's really gonna end up happening at the end of the day. Both options have had successes. Both options have had failures. So you're kind of just gonna have to go with what you want to do at that point. Whitebox soon accepted her as an employee and she was scheduled to start working on November 23rd. However, the day before, a Liner staffing manager told Whitebox that she had canceled a woman's position because she's deaf. Okay, so you were told that she's deaf. You knew this. Don't care. Let's hire her. Okay, cool. And then literally the next day, no, that's bad. So why did you change your mind? The staffing agency proceeded to ignore the woman when she contacted them that day to confirm her start date at the warehouse. So you didn't even tell her that she wasn't going to start? You didn't even tell her that she didn't have the job anymore? That's messed up. I mean, it's already messed up, but that's even more messed up. 8 days later, on November 30th, a representative finally responded to a text the woman had sent and said that they did not have sign language interpreters and therefore could not place her. You don't have the thing? so you get the thing. Also, we don't need sign language interpreters 24/7. Usually they only come at meetings. You don't need a sign language interpreter at the hip working in a warehouse. So if it's for meetings, you don't have the thing, you get the thing, and you are legally required by law to get the thing. Meanwhile, the woman was fully qualified to do the job. She experienced emotional pain, embarrassment, lost wages, and more as a result of the job getting pulled. I mean, because it is already so hard to find a job and to find a good job at that, something stable, something that is guaranteed to give you a paycheck, not like self-employment where you literally, it's like playing the lottery. You don't know how much you're gonna get. My Patreon goes up and down. Sometimes I have more clients on a day, sometimes I don't. Sometimes my YouTube videos actually make more than $3 per video for once. Most of the time they don't. So when you finally get accepted for something that's supposed to be stable, so you're not as stressed as, say, a self-employed disabled person with their own business, and having that pulled away, taken away from you, that's going to hurt. That is going to be embarrassing, and it just really kicks you down and really hurts your self-esteem. As part of the lawsuit settlement, Linear Staffing will adopt a new policy to ensure its deaf applicants will have access to sign language interpreters. That's called the Americans with Disabilities Act. But hey, go have that new policy. I mean, cool, have it. I just think it's funny that it's like, we're gonna have this brand new policy when it's like, you've had a policy since 1990. But okay, it's 30 years old. I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it completely. I'm just picking on it a little bit. It's just funny to me, it's just funny. Additionally, managers will be trained on reasonable accommodations and deaf communication. I'm curious to know what the reasonable accommodations are, because funny enough, I'm going through that same thing with my future landlord about reasonable accommodations for my new apartment, for my first apartment. So I'm curious to know what these reasonable accommodations are, and about the deaf communication part, which I'm assuming is going to be the sign language interpreters for meetings and stuff, and then like your everyday like visual hand gestures, writing down, typing, things like that. People seem to think that having to communicate with deaf people is so hard. Really, it's not. And hearing people have a tendency to make it much more complicated than it actually needs to be. And so things end up taking way longer, become more frustrating, or never end up coming to a conclusion because they get so frustrated, even though like we'll be sitting here telling them this is how to do it, and that's it, done, easy. But then they want to like kind of butt heads a little bit, so it doesn't really work out. That is what adds on to the complications of being a deaf person in a society, in a hearing society, and the ableism and whatever. That makes it more complicated. It's not us, I swear. Linear Staffing will also keep the EEOC informed on how it deals with possible future disability discrimination complaints. Don't discriminate. Done. Here's one about a deaf woman who wins a settlement from a hospital that refused to hire her in Minnesota. Deaf woman wins a $180,000 settlement from hospital that refused to hire her. A deaf Minnesota woman has won a $180,000 settlement from a hospital that denied her a job as a greeter, telling her that pandemic masking rules would impede her ability to lip read. So mask wearing does make lip reading essentially impossible because, well, you can't see anything, so therefore you cannot lip read somebody wearing a mask. So that part is right. However, there are masks with translucent windows and other masks that are even more translucent than the ones with little windows. I'm just saying. So that was always a solution. Granted, not a whole lot of people know about that. So, but hey, I'm just telling you now. Kayla, 26, of Maple Grove, claimed in a federal lawsuit against North Memorial Health that she was qualified for the job she applied for in 2020 at its hospital in Robbinsdale. Her duties would have included greeting visitors, enforcing COVID-19 masking policies, giving directions, and keeping the area neat. Okay, so my question is she greeting them and like checking them in, or is it just hello, you know, like Walmart greeters or something? But I mean, it's not going to be difficult to greet people. It's not going to be difficult to enforce mask policies, or at least tell people to wear a mask. Giving directions wouldn't be difficult at all, because that would be me telling you how to get somewhere, not you telling me how to get somewhere. And keeping the area neat, I mean, that's not difficult. That doesn't require your ears, especially that last part. That last part does not require using your ears. She said in a filing that she wears hearing aids that permit her to hear people speaking without any difficulty. She can communicate verbally and can also communicate with American Sign Language. What superpowers do you have, Kayla, that you can hear people with your hearing aids without any difficulty and they're wearing a mask? Because I also wear hearing aids, and sometimes, very, very rarely, I can hear and understand people. With hearing aids in, if somebody is wearing a mask, I can typically hear that they are talking, but the understanding part is a lot more different. It's a lot more different, and it's a lot more complicated, and a little more impossible. Now, I am not saying that she is lying and that she cannot understand these people, but how did you do it? Because I can't. North Memorial reportedly cited the pandemic-related challenges faced by greeters who needed strong listening and verbal communication skills while interacting with individuals experiencing stress and grief. But if you're just greeting somebody, does it really have to be that complicated? That's a genuine question. How much of her job how much more than just simply greeting someone is her job? Greeters needed to communicate quickly and succinctly with visitors regarding visitor policy, assess visitors' understanding and compliance, and troubleshoot while communication was significantly hindered by COVID-necessitated face masks. So that answered my question. Ask and ye shall receive. I mean, hearing people were already having trouble communicating with masks on, right? I don't know how many hearing people were constantly asking me to repeat myself, and watching hearing people ask others to repeat themselves because they can't hear somebody very well with the mask on because it sounds muffled, etc. I mean, if this is all a concern, why not do a test run with this woman, I guess? If you're really that concerned that she's not going to be able to understand people, do a test run. Also, technology is decent at this point where there's a lot of accessibility options with phones, with live captioning apps and things like that. On Thursday, they reached a consent decree for the settlement in the U.S. District Court in Minneapolis, meaning the hospital system makes no admission of wrongdoing, but agrees to shell out the money and take other actions to address rights protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm not surprised that the hospital is not going to admit to any wrongdoings, because the medical industry is probably one of the more frustrating industries to just deal with, job-wise, visiting-wise, anything-wise, so I'm not shocked by that. Unfortunately, some employers continue to discriminate against deaf applicants based on myths, fears, and stereotypes about their ability to do the job because of their disability, which is true. I mean, I'm gonna be upfront here. Me working in a hospital with that kind of job, I would not personally apply for that job because I know straight up that I'm not going to be able to understand people with masks on. I couldn't understand them before hearing aids. I definitely still can't understand them with them on. I've only been able to understand really one person consistently with a mask on, and I want to say that's because he purposely made himself louder like the whole time. I mean, there are times when there are bits and pieces of things that I understand. I mean, I went to the hospital at the beginning of the year because I had a stroke, or I had symptoms of a stroke. I don't know, that whole thing's complicated. There's a video on it, by the way. And a lot of times when the nurses and the doctors, all the people that were coming in would be trying to talk to me with their masks on and I had my hearing aids in, half the time I wasn't understanding what the heck they were saying. And that's a whole different rant for another day, which was already covered in that previous video if you want to go take a look at that. So I personally would not be applying for this job. You would not want to hire me, personally, for this job. But Kayla, if she's got the experience, I'm saying do a test run, I guess. I feel like maybe there's a better word for that than test run. I mean, if she's telling you that she has a very good track record of hearing and understanding people with their hearing aids on, test that. This is probably the only time you will hear or see me say, test somebody's hearing with their hearing aids. Normally I would say don't do that, don't cover your mouth and do all that, whatever. But for something like this, I guess that sounds okay to do. Because she's like, I can do this, let me prove it to you. I don't know. Does that sound too bizarre to suggest? I don't know. We recognize that our hiring processes in place for temporary roles may have been compromised during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we understand her disappointment in the decisions that were made at the time. For temporary roles, so it was a temporary job. I don't know where my question is with that, but I don't know, something about them saying it's a temporary role. So it's a new role? I don't know. It added that it has reviewed specific practices following this case and will continue to strive to ensure our customers, our current, past, and future team members, and our providers feel valued and respected. Under the 2-year term of the decree, the hospital system must apply its disability anti-discrimination and reasonable accommodation policies to all applicants and provide training to staffers involved in hiring. Once again, that policy is the ADA. Maybe that's what it's talking about, not just some sort of separate hospital policy, but that policy is already the ADA. After I self-identified as an individual with deafness and requested a reasonable accommodation, I was fired instantly without their further attempt to work with me. Ultimately, it affected my career choices and how I navigate the world. If you were fired instantly, had you already been hired like the previous person? I want to know what the accommodations were. One of them is obviously probably going to be an ASL interpreter, but what were the other accommodations and for when? But I don't think she's gonna say. For this story in particular, for the latter, for the hospital, that's a little bit more complicated just because I feel like there's more information than I want to know about, and you could probably find it in other articles maybe, but that one seemed pretty lengthy to begin with. So I don't know, there's some things that I just, if you are simply a greeter saying hi, hello, and you're gonna let them know that they need to wear a mask, keep the area clean, how does that make it a no? But I mean, listen, you know, we have deaf doctors about, right? I know on Instagram, I want to say maybe TikTok, she might be on, it might be the same doctor on both TikTok and Instagram. She's deaf, and she's a doctor. Like, I think she's working in hospitals even. So, and that's a much more complicated job to be a greeter. And if you understand people with your hearing aids, you know, like, also aren't hospitals now, like, saying that you don't need to wear a mask anymore, so there's that. I don't know, that one's a bit more mind-boggling to me. It makes me think a little bit more, and I'm not sure where I am on that. Just let her do a test run, I guess, jeez. But anyway, yeah, so they settled that. The hospital said, we didn't do anything wrong, but, we're tired of this. We don't want to deal with this anymore. So here, just take the money and like go away. Again, I'm not surprised by that, but okay. But hey, if you've got an opinion on the matter, that's what the comment box is for. So you can leave your comments down below. Any experiences, if you have similar experiences. But speaking of work, I do have a Patreon page. So if you want more exclusive content and you want to support the work that I do in terms of making accessibility awareness and things like that, for $1 a month at the very lowest, you can make that happen. So I will have that link down below. That is always very much appreciated. YouTube also has a tip jar down here. It's the little super chat, the little $sign that you might see. So if you don't want to go out to a different website like Patreon, or you just want to do a one-time thing, that's also an option. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you are not going to miss out, hopefully, on more videos like this, serious videos like this, and just overall talking about whatever. That's also very much appreciated. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and I will see you later.